Hello friends, welcome to my channel. Today, I will recap the movie called Synchronic. A young couple shares a passionate kiss while lying in bed in a hotel room. On a stormy night, a new illegal drug called Synchronic has emerged. They leave the room and take the escalator eagerly, anticipating the drug's effects. Almost instantly their perceptions begin to change. The woman feels the room's walls disappearing as she sees a tribal spirit and a man appears. She makes her way through a thick jungle while the man watches her. She screams in terror when she sees a snake approaching. Meanwhile, the man notices crumbling walls and the sudden appearance of a barren wasteland. He loses his footing and falls to the elevator floor. The scene shifts to introduce us to the main characters. Steve and Dennis, who work as paramedics in the suburbs, are best friends. After responding to an overdose call, they arrive at a residence and find two very intoxicated people. A nearby resident who claims to have heard disturbing noises and French being spoken is present. Dennis finds a conscious but bleeding man with an open wound on his back while treating him. Steve accidentally pricks himself before injecting an overdose victim. The young woman appears to be under the influence of something that heightens her awareness. The police quickly arrive and confiscate the Synchronic. They believe it's simply addicts fighting among themselves. As they leave, Steve notices and picks up a copper coin from the floor while helping the wounded man to the ambulance. The officers discover a blood-stained sword on the wall. The partnership between Steve and Dennis continues seamlessly at this point. Later, Steve plays golf and examines the coin again, noticing the date fascinates him. After overcoming his fear of needles for HIV testing, the doctor recommends a comprehensive physical examination. The next day, Steve attends Dennis's daughter's birthday at a family picnic. Dennis's eldest daughter, Brianna, sits alone on a rock. Steve approaches her to talk. He knows exactly how much his niece loves him. Steve tries to get Brianna to share what she's been up to recently, but his phone call interrupts their conversation. That evening, Dennis and Steve rush to another accident where someone died from burns. The officers find no signs of a fire nearby, leaving them puzzled about what caused the victim's death. They discover an empty package and a melted doorknob. Later, Steve visits the doctor and learns from a brain scan that he has a tumor. This news makes him deeply uneasy. Their next case involves the hotel couple. The woman needs help because a snake bit her knee. She appears dismayed and whispers her lover's name. They find another Synchronic packet at the scene. An animal control officer tells them they haven't found any snake despite searching everywhere. He confirms it was a snake bite, though that species has never been seen in the area for a considerable amount of time. Steve later finds a store bag where the victim bought the Synchronic. The hotel manager reports hearing a loud thud from the elevator shaft. Dennis investigates and finds the woman's boyfriend lying motionless at the bottom. They transport him to the hospital. Dennis ensures that Steve takes his medication at the prescribed intervals. Steve learns from his doctor that a growth on his pineal gland is cancerous. The numbers are concerning. The prognosis is unclear. He may have weeks or years to live depending on how he responds to medication and therapy. Eventually, Steve decides against telling Dennis about his condition, though he contemplates doing so. Later, Mr. Dwight plays basketball with Brianna while trying to understand her language. She assures him everything is fine, but he feels distant from her as a father. She's anxious because she doesn't know what she wants from life. While celebrating Steve's birthday, Dennis visits the bar late at night to surprise him with a lamp. Dennis confesses he's having marital problems and isn't sure about being a family man. Sometimes he envies Steve's life without a partner. Steve doesn't tell Dennis about the tumor, and Dennis takes this opportunity to confront him about his medication usage despite the risk of addiction. Steve simply responds, "I can handle it," insisting on managing his personal needs himself. The next day, they respond to another overdose call at a house party with teenagers. Two people lie on the floor. One is completely still. The other speaks nonsense. When asked if anyone else was present, one mentions Brianna was with him. This news comes as a great relief. Dennis calls his wife and learns Brianna isn't home, confirming she's no longer with them. Now that Synchronic has harmed someone he cares about, Steve feels terrible. Steve purchases all remaining packets from the store that sells Synchro. A man quickly approaches Steve's car offering to buy the Synchro at a better price than retail, but Steve tells him to leave. Dennis is at home with his family. They're contacting police and distributing flyers about Brianna. His wife is disappointed, feeling they're failing as parents. That night, Steve and his dog Hawking are asleep. When Steve hears a sound from the living room, he investigates with a bat and finds the store owner hiding in the closet. The man freely admits to creating Synchronic, and Steve threatens to hit him. The man introduces himself as Dr. Connie, a professional chemist who has always aspired to obtain the Synchronic product currently available in every state. He explains that he creates synthetic shoes by working with the molecular structure of different materials. He makes structural modifications to legal pharmaceuticals to make them resemble illegal ones. What began as a simple pastime has evolved into Synchronic, which fundamentally changes spacetime, allowing users to travel between different eras. The drug affects the pineal gland, which is responsible for some adults' ability to transmit their physical form as specters or shadows at death. Young individuals whose pineal glands aren't fully developed can still traverse vast distances and quickly become entangled in situations. Connie has dedicated all his efforts to discovering and eradicating Synchronic, with the store being his final stop. Steve claims he flushed the drugs, but after Connie leaves, it's revealed Steve actually kept them aside. Steve returns home following his chemotherapy treatment, experiencing severe nausea and vomiting without warning. No matter how hard he works, Steve constantly feels exhausted. Dennis receives an unexpected call from the hospital about missing morphine supplies. Suspecting Steve because of his changed behavior, Dennis still doesn't know about the tumor. They respond to a call about a man with a broken leg who doesn't speak English. While working together, they begin to feel a connection with the patient. Dennis starts lecturing Steve, claiming Steve is late because of unemployment. Steve argues he can perform his duties. They exchange heated insults as they prepare to leave, and their argument quickly turns violent until the ambulance driver physically separates them. Steve walks away, while Dennis returns home that night. Steve examines the coin from the crime scene. His curiosity about trying Synchronic is aroused by the date on the coin, with only an hour and a half until sunrise. He takes a pill. The living room lights come on, and a swamp appears. Everything feels so tangible that he can barely trust his senses of smell and sight. Steve notices a man praying behind him. Then a crocodile suddenly materializes. As he backs away, he realizes he's also leaving the present time. A Spanish conquistador unexpectedly appears before him. Steve is caught off guard as the man charges at him with a sword, leaving him bewildered and unsure how to react. Steve returns to his living room just as the Spaniard attacks, with Hawking looking perplexed. Steve believes it was all in his head until he sees a wound on the floor from the conquistador's sword. Fascinated by everything, Steve decides to record it all. He believes Brianna experienced something similar and can use Synchronic to go back 7 minutes in time to find her. After taking another pill, he suddenly appears in a frozen desert, feeling the intense cold. Steve nearly passes out just as he sees someone approaching. When 7 minutes have passed, Steve rushes back to his living room, still feeling chilled, realizing his location determines which time period he visits. Steve tries again from the same spot. This time, he brings warm clothes and collects firewood in anticipation of the cold back in the frozen terrain. He spots a fire and approaches a prehistoric man holding a spear. After touching Steve, the caveman lowers his weapon. They sit together until the 7 minutes pass and Steve gradually returns to the present. Meanwhile, things worsened between Dennis and his wife. Since Brianna's disappearance, Steve hears on the radio that Dr. Connie committed suicide. Remembering how EMTs found the blade coin and doorknob in the houses they visited, Steve decides to try something new. He hugs Hawking and takes another synchro. They arrive in a time when the majority of locals are extremely racist. A man forces them out of a house and townspeople star as they try to leave after 7 minutes. Steve is surprised to find himself still in the past, trying to escape. He sneaks back into the house where he and Hawking first appeared. The man calls his friends, who arrive wearing the infamous white robes. A chaotic fight ensues in the living room just as the men are about to shoot him. Steve suddenly returns to his living room without Hawking. Steve hears Hawking barking and sees him cautiously making his way to the window. Steve learns 2 important lessons. After 7 minutes, You can't go beyond where you started, and you should take what you want with you since Hawking got left behind because he gave the dog his leash back. Like Hawking, he couldn't retrieve his pet because they were out of sync. Since Brianna was last seen at university dorms, Steve visits the location. One of the teenagers at the first location said she saw Brianna sitting there before she disappeared. Steve tries going there and ends up in the middle of a forest where men performing a ritual mistake him for a spirit they've summoned. They quickly surround him as he turns around and runs back the way he came. Later, he fortunately has a lawn chair available to travel more comfortably to bygone eras. The teenager who mentioned Brianna politely clarifies that she didn't truly disappear, but became disoriented about where she belonged. Dennis meets Steve at a bar and confesses his marriage might be ending. His wife promised undying love on their wedding day, but he still doesn't believe her, though he feels terrible about breaking his promise to reciprocate that love. He claims their marriage couldn't have survived without Brianna. Now that she's gone, they feel completely disconnected. Now, Steve mentions he would willingly give up his single life if it meant Dennis could be happy in his marriage. Dennis is completely unprepared for this revelation and becomes angry. When Steve finally admits he has a brain tumor, Steve reassures him that he's been undergoing chemotherapy. After reconciling, Dennis mentions the ambulance driver was responsible for the missing morphine. Steve takes Dennis to a cemetery to show him video evidence. Dennis worries. Brianna might be trapped in the past due to Synchronic's effects and wonders if she left them a clue. Steve thinks of the small rock in the park where they sat together. They rush there and find only the word always inscribed. They're certain this is exactly where Brianna disappeared with almost no Synchronic pills left. Steve returns for her. He's transported to the American Civil War amid the deafening din of cannons and bombs. He runs to a bunker, finds a pile of bodies, and calls for Brianna. After crawling through corpses, he hears and finds her. They reconcile, and Steve gives Brianna his last Synchronic pill, urging her to reach the rock within 7 minutes or remain trapped forever. As they rush toward the rock, Steve manages to stop them. Suddenly, a soldier rushes up to Brianna and demands her help. Steve is enslaved when they threaten him with a gun. The 7 minutes have passed. Trapping Steve in that era, realizing Brianna is still unharmed, he devises a plan. He uses his wits to trick the soldier into stepping on a mine. The soldier steps on it just as he's about to fire, and Brianna vanishes. A massive explosion startles both Steve and the soldier, causing the soldier to trip and detonate the landmine. As Steve sits on the rock, Brianna returns to the present and reunites with her father. Steve briefly materializes as a ghost on the rock before disappearing forever. A captive of the past. And the movie ends here. Thanks for watching.